What are we recording to, Mr. Burns?
I'm sorry.
When are we recording?
Just a second, I'm going to pop up. It started, that's going to let it get caught up. We're popped up. I don't know what.
Just record it to something,
My phone?
whatever. Record it to something, and we can post it later.
That's right.
And can you record it on your iPad?
Yeah, probably.
Can you make a copy off of this card that I've got in this camera? Probably, it's about the size of a postage stamp.
Not here, but I can.
Oh,
Okay, we're recording. It's the best shot I can get from you right here.
So I'm gonna recommend that we just start over.
Okay. The entire thing, or?
I would assume that we weren't broadcasting from the get-go, correct?
According to Ms. Moore, we were not.
Start over from the get-go, please. Not, don't have to do the prayer again, but start over from the get-go. Sorry.
All right, we're starting the meeting over on the first.
Okay.
You ready?
Yes, sir.
You wanna do the pledge and everything?
No, no pledge.
Okay, we're just gonna start, you want just to, start?
To approve
number
the chief,
two?
please.
Okay. All right, starting over, because of technical difficulties, we'll start with number 2, approve agenda. 2A is to approve to amend the agenda to include the additional items. 2B is to approve to excuse board member Garnet Skaggs from the meeting due to illness. 5D3C, use of facilities by Eastern Elite Soccer for practice and games. Add Fallsburg to 5J 2021, technology usage expectations, Chromebook fees. Add Fallsburg and Louisa West to 5D4B, SBDM council minutes under new business. And 5X1, approve to change the location of September regular board meeting from Fallsburg Elementary to Lawrence County High School. I'm just going to read off. We had a motion from Madeline and a second from Barb, and the vote was 4-0. 2B, to approve to excuse board member Garnet Skaggs from the meeting due to illness. We had a motion from Jim and a second from Madeline, and the vote was 4-0. Now, 3, we had student staff presentations, and at the time we did not have any. So we're back to 4, communication superintendent's update. Dr. Fletcher.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Again, 3 items here that I want to go over with the board members. It deals with a synopsis of the following the governor's recommendation, an overview of what opening schools look like virtually, and then also 2, the potential for additional guidance from the Kentucky Department of Education. And then after that, of course, if board members at any point would like to ask questions, you're more than welcome to. But if you want to wait till after the end, that's fine too, but I will leave it up to board members. Start off with a synopsis of the following the governor's recommendation. Approximately 2 weeks ago, we were given a recommendation, well actually about 3 to 4 weeks ago, we were asked to move our start date to at least August 17th. When we moved it to August 17th, there was the Lawrence County Board of Education had already made the decision to move our in-person start date to August 26th. The reason for that was to take advantage of the flexible schedule that was available on or in KRS and statute. So with that being said, we started off with some recommendations, and then when we had our first meeting, a question came to the Kentucky Department of Education Commissioner of what exactly do these, as far as recommendations, do we have the ability not to follow governor's recommendation? I posed a question to Liberty Mutual, as several superintendents across our state did, and according to Liberty Mutual, they see these as, it's their understanding that there will be consequences to schools who do not follow the recommendations. In essence, by imposing consequences, this causes this to become a requirement, potentially from a legal standpoint. So farther down, Liberty Mutual's response was, we encourage schools to follow federal, state, and local guidance with respect to their operations, including reopening and whether we to have fall sports concerning the coronavirus. So with all that being said, we were told there would be consequences. There are meetings that are being scheduled with districts, with various districts across the state, talking about whether or not they're going to reopen in person. At this point, I made a decision that we should, based on our Liberty Mutual release and based on our last board meeting of having our days moved back, our in-person moved back to September 28th, which was the governor's recommendation. Now, with that being said, we've had multiple meetings, and I've asked the governor personally. Well, within the meeting, there was 4 questions asked. I asked 2 of them, and I did make some comments about to the governor. 0 at that point. There were 0 cases in Lawrence County, 0 quarantine. So, what metric would we use in Lawrence County to say there shouldn't be any school? At that point, Dr. Stack said, answered me and the rest of the superintendents on the line, stating that there was no state-by-state metric. Now, I will say that we were given a metric today, or at least, I found a metric today, and I think this was something that was discovered. There are some metrics out there that talks about incidents per 100,000. And so we do have some of that information moving forward. But right now, with our governor's recommendation and the consequences are labeled, I would look at, for us to look at starting at September 28th. Now, we do, rewind for just a second. What that means is 4A2 is opening schools virtually. In talking with the schools, just remember, we were told last Monday, a week ago today, that our schools should start virtually. So all the plans that our principals had put together dealing with how do we clean, how do we bring in students, how do we take temperatures, how do we do our schedules, all that had to change pretty quickly because of this. So once that decision was made, the cleaning schedules, transportation schedules, temperature checks, masks, all that was put on hold. So our focus became more along the lines of how do we open virtually. So schools started doing some schedules as far as how do we start up. For example, we have different schools that are doing drive-in for pickups for Chromebooks. They'll drive in, not have to come to the building, but we also have some schools that have like one-on-one meetings with parents to allow them to come in, because again, that would be less than 10 in our building. So different schools have started doing different plans for opening, getting information out, getting out textbooks, getting out Chromebooks. But one of the other things that has shifted is how do we handle in-person? Because before we had 3 options. We had in-person, we had the at-home, taught by teachers, and we also had the virtual, the 3rd option. We'll talk more about that later on in the agenda. But teachers, for the most part, I have talked to every principal today, and the expectation there is teachers will be posting videos of themselves, of their colleagues, or posting videos of maybe from Khan Academy or from Edpuzzle and other sources that'll basically give instruction on to students as needed. But then also having flexible times, because how many parents do we have that have 5 kids, 7 kids? You know, it would be very difficult for our parents to say, I'm going to have every one of my kids on the computer at 8 o'clock. So I'm very thankful that our teachers have started working on plans of having different times available, even sometimes after 4 o'clock, to allow students to be able to talk. Now, I will not ask any teacher to be on the computer at 2 a.m. In the spring, we were having a lot of students that would send emails and texts and things like that at 2 a.m. to teachers asking questions. So we'll have to do some restraints there as far as different times, but again, have flexibility so that every single student in a household of 5 can't be online at the same time. As a matter of fact, I talked to one parent that said that their internet wouldn't handle 5 students at one time. So again, trying to do those flexible schedules for all of us to start virtually. Now, on item 3, in talking with some different folks, we do expect some additional guidance to come out that'll allow us to have some students inside the building before September 28th, but it would be in small groups. And I'm understanding there's going to be a time limit to that. There's also going to be, it has to be more like remediation and intervention and those type of things. So we will probably, I'm guessing that we'll get guidance either tomorrow in our superintendent meeting or later in the week that'll have some where we can bring in some small groups. I am considering, as we move forward, depending on what we could get approved from KDE and other things, of possibly bringing in some small groups of students beforehand. Like, for example, our kindergartners, they've never been in school before. It would make sense if we could bring those in for a couple days and get them acclimated before we brought everybody in. Possibly 6th graders, possibly 9th graders, but of course all that would have to be approved by the Kentucky Department of Health or our health department and also by KDE. So again, abiding by the governor's recommendations, because truly, and if you've seen our post at that point, two weeks ago, they were not recommendations, they were mandates. And I think the statement from Liberty Mutual will also back that up too. Now, will there be some people across the state? Looks like they're trying to start earlier. It does appear that there will be. As far as the repercussions, my understanding, they have started some of those meetings, and we'll see how that looks moving forward. As a matter of fact, Greene County started today in person. So we'll, on one hand, we'll get to see how it's going for another district. But on the other hand, I don't know who their insurance carrier is, but I wish them the best of luck. And however they go, I wish them the absolute best of luck. For right now, we do plan to go with everybody on the 28th, unless the governor comes out with other recommendations, and then also looking at possibly bringing in some small groups beforehand as long as it's permitted. Again, we want to make sure we abide by our health department and also, other things to allow our students to come in when possible. So with that being said, I've given you a synopsis of the governor's recommendation of what we've seen. I've also given you an overview of what it looks like virtually. It's going to be a little different than the NTI we're used to. There's going to be a lot more instruction, a lot more items like that. Again, I think some of our teachers did an excellent job. I'll give you an example. Back in the spring, we had some teachers that would do themes. We had a group of teachers that did Fortnite. In other words, build a fort in your house, learn in your house in your fort. They called it Fortnite. They had some wear your Sunday best. Students would have to dress like they were going to church or going to school, as opposed to being in their pajamas, but they would still be online 2 hours with teachers. So I'm very pleased with what a lot of our teachers did in the spring, but there's a lot of room for improvement too. For example, how often can we give instruction to students? So those are the things that we're focusing on moving forward. Then the last thing too is just to make the board informed as I am. There hasn't been anything official yet, but we are expecting additional guidance from the Kentucky Department of Education that will give us how many students that we can have in a building before September 28th. As of right now, they're not giving us any guidance for a full building at that point. But even then, keep in mind that less than 60% of our student body wants to go in person. So we're looking at, I think our last number was around 58, 59% of our students, of our parents, actually wants their schools in the building. So we're finding ways to accommodate the other 30%, and then, the other 40, almost a little over 40% through option 2 and option 3, which we discussed in our last board meeting. So again, even if we go in person, whenever we go in person, our community is divided. Our community is divided almost a little bit better than 50-50. It's close to 60-40. But I still believe that they deserve the right to go in person. If that's what we serve our community, we serve our students. They should have that opportunity, and I hope as we move forward there should be some changes so we can allow that. So right now, September 28th, we're supposed to get more guidance from Kentucky High School Athletic Association on Thursday about what they expect for fall sports. So we should get that also on Thursday too. So that being said, I'll turn it over to the chairman for any type of comments or questions of me. I'll be happy to answer those.
I'll start with the first comment. I want to make it very clear. I think everybody we've talked to, we want to go back to school.
Yes, sir.
But this board has made some extremely hard decisions and some extremely tough decisions, and we just cannot risk our financial stability on a liability issue or a lawsuit or something like that. I mean, we all know, we look at this budget all the time, and we've improved our financial stability so many fold. Since I've been on this board. And we've been able to do things like teacher raises, and we've been able to do things like technology for all of our kids, and all these different things. And we want to go back to school, but I understand the liability issues, and I don't think, if I was 20-something, I'd be a gambler. But at 44, I don't want to gamble what so much strides we've taken. And that's the way I feel about it. I'll turn it over to anybody else on the board if they'd like to make a comment.
Can I make an addition there, Mr. Chairman? And that's the other thing too. I think that any plan that we have, no matter when we start, we have to measure that school safety. When is it good to have all students in, or as many that'll come, versus, for example, if we have a COVID case in the 4th grade, is it possible just to close down the 4th grade out of school? Contact tracing is going to make depend a lot of things there. So again, as far as that liability, I agree. I think that's a good point. Thanks, sir.
I'm not sure that even though we follow the governor's recommendations and his guidelines, I'm not sure that we would come out as clean. I'm sure we probably will not, but there's going to be problems with any particular scenario. I kind of feel like we're being hoodwinked a little bit. This administration has not given much wiggle room at all. And if you look at West Virginia, for instance, they have a system in place, and they look at individual areas where it is, where it's a hot spot, they're not going. They'll do virtual. Where it is a little bit less, they're doing a combination. Where it's not bad, like Lawrence County, for instance, they're going back to school. And it kind of surprised me that you indicated that Greenock was going back, but that's good. I think that if they're willing to take a chance.
Greene County. I'm sorry, Greene County, not Greenock. There's, to my knowledge, no one in the 15th and 16th region is going early.
I'm sorry.
We're the 15th, 16th, everyone is going
I
virtually.
thought you said Greene.
No, Greene.
Okay. I had heard that Greene County was contemplating going back. And I'm wondering what insurance carrier they have as well. To my knowledge, for school systems, there's not that many carriers out there. So if they're willing to take a risk, I don't know their particular situation. I don't even know how many cases they've had in Greene County, but nonetheless, they're evidently going to take a chance. But our parents need to be, I think, in this as well, so that they can make some decisions for their children. I'll kind of stop short at where I was going, but I just think that we are being hoodwinked. We have not been given the opportunity that we should have.
If I may add to that, sir, Senator Wise actually put out a social media post of similar of West Virginia coming up with a hot areas, cold areas, if you will, and talking about metrics for Kentucky and leading a group of educators. I volunteered for that committee. I actually put that on social media back to him. I'd be more than happy to serve on that committee with a group of health officials, with a group of superintendents, with a group of educators, whoever that our Senate would like to put on that committee. I actually volunteered to be a part of that. So again, I agree that it would be nice if we had regional control. And if I may make one more comment, if you wouldn't mind, in any statistics class that you do, it's always been said you take out your two outliers, or you take out your outliers, and then start making decisions. If you're making a statewide decision based on and including Jefferson County and Fayette County in your data, you've got two outliers. So what do you do for the rest of the state? Now, again, I do believe that Dr. Stack is doing his very level best. I'm not going to say anything against the gentleman, I think that there's a lot of recommendations he feels heartfelt. But I think I would like for it to be local control, or at least regional control, if that's the case. But rest assured, from my knowledge and talking with superintendents, there are some school systems talking about things like I was telling you about bringing some kids in small groups. But to my knowledge, everyone in the 15th and 16th region is going back virtually to start the school year.
Well, you know, you need to pick your battles.
Yes, sir.
This one you probably would lose if you went forward. I understand that.
Yes, sir.
But I still think that there needs to be some flexibility with these tough decisions. If you look at West Virginia, if you look at Ohio, you look at Tennessee, they are offering more flexibility than what Kentucky is. And I think we could do a little bit better.
Well, one of the comments that was made today by Dr. Stack, my understanding, I was reading this from an article, was there's no expectation to have a vaccine in 2020.
Exactly.
There's no way, and very little expectation to have enough vaccines worldwide for 2021. So how do we learn to live in a COVID world? So with that being said, how do we handle that moving forward? I think that's a big decision we make. Again, that was an article I read. Sometimes you got to look at the source, but it was quoted Dr. Stack as saying no vaccine for 2020, and potentially, even with the limited number of vaccines that will be available worldwide, who knows what we'd have available even in Kentucky for 2021.
Even if a vaccine is available, you're going to force kids to take a shot?
Again, correct. Yes, sir.
If I'm not mistaken, West Virginia's funding for schools is different than ours.
Yes, ma'am.
And if I'm not mistaken about this, even before this pandemic, they could have one school out in their district and the rest could still go.
Yes.
So, that's pretty much what they're doing now, but I don't think that we can do that. I don't think
Well, they are based on, you're exactly right, Ms. Robinson. It's average daily membership in West Virginia schools. So, for example, you may have a building that has 200 students that are enrolled and have only 10 show up, and you still get funding for 200. In Kentucky, now this year is a little different, and we've talked about this before. We could have 300 students transfer to Lawrence County this year, and we don't get any more funding for them, which is great. I hope they all do transfer here. But all of our funding right now is based on 2018, 2019 numbers. So with that being said, you're absolutely correct. It's average daily membership in West Virginia, whereas it's average daily attendance. So if we have 100 students in a school and only 10 show up, we only get funding for those 10. Now, it's a little bit different if we do an in-person and they're still enrolled in Lawrence County. I'm sorry, at home and still enrolled. So there's some caveats there, but great point. Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Anybody else? The next issue, you hit on it, and I want to bring it up again, but the overview of the virtual world that we're going to be in.
Yes, sir.
And you hit on it, and just like my brother and sister-in-law have 5 kids. They all cannot get on the internet at the same time. I know that we've talked about expectations of kids being online at 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock and those kind of things. I guess we only got one principal here. I wish they were all here, but from a board perspective, and I hope everybody else will chime in, if we need to make a board policy, we can. I don't think we have to, but I guess just want to make it clear, I don't want a kid punished for not being able, something that's out of their control, and not being able to fulfill their work for the day. And just like the family I know that's had 7 kids, they can't all get on the internet at the same time. When they do, it just sits and spins, and they can't see anything.
Obviously we've had internet issues tonight.
We've had internet issues right here. We know that we have those issues. Right. We just don't want a kid to suffer a penalty because of something that's beyond their control. And I think that just needs to be as clear as we can make it. And I hope some of the other board members can chime in too, but those issues, and even like my own children, I've got 2 that are in high school. One just entering high school, one's in high school, and then one's in elementary school. The 2 that's in high school, I can make them get up and do it. My young one has to have somebody there, but me and my wife both work. She's gonna have to have guidance. And we both work till most of the time, well, I won't get home till 9 o'clock tonight probably. But, you know, my wife works till 5:30, 6:30 sometimes. It just depends on what day of the week. So she cannot be online, and I don't want to push her off on another family member or a grandparent or something and say, okay, now you have to be there with her to do that. That's our responsibility as parents. So how are we going to handle those issues? I think that's the biggest issue that I see with this, and we've had the issues from before, and it makes it very tough. And I know we put midnight deadlines on, and I know that my son 3 was guilty of waiting too late to do it. That's my responsibility as a parent to make him do it. But how are we going to handle those issues beyond the students' control? That's the biggest thing that I worry.
If I may, talking with every principal today, that was the one of the big topics. You know, how do you handle? For example, you can be a little more strict with the high school student because they can get on, they can do their own thing. When you get into those lower grades, let's face it, how many of our parents are going to have to be online with them in kindergarten, first, second grade? And even so, there may be some special cases even in the high school. So every single principal talked about flexibility today. And first of all, how do we make sure that we give everybody the equal opportunity? And then it's going to come down to communication. You know, we encourage parents to call their teachers. We encourage students. But again, that communication, we have to communicate with every student daily. Now, that communication could be in a virtual conference, an online conference like what we've done, Zoom meetings, things like that. And it could also be through turn-in assignments. It could be through Google Classroom and other things. But you're absolutely correct, and I will say this, it's at the forefront of our principals' minds and our teachers' minds. And as a matter of fact, a lot of our teachers, even when we were talking about, you know, when we were doing option 1, option 2, and option 3, the people that couldn't handle the schedule were coming to school. So that's how they were handling not being able to handle the schedule. If we can't do a schedule, we're going to send them to school. So with the governor's announcement and the change to virtual, that shifted how we need to approach this online system at least till September 28th. So again, I'm in talking with every principal, it's almost exactly what you've said. We need to look at how can we be some flexibility, give some deadlines, but it doesn't have to be if you're on at 9, you got an assignment due at 9:55. You know, it may have to be you may have to have that assignment done by midnight that night. It just needs to be enough flexibility to give those students enough time. That's the reason for the videos. You know, if a teacher is going to present a concept at 9 o'clock, they need to video themselves, post that for those kids that couldn't get on. But still, you still need to have it finished maybe by noon tomorrow or midnight tonight. Because if you don't do those type of deadlines, you know as well as I do, we keep putting it off. So again, to help out, we've also we've ordered hotspots for our parking lots. So even if somebody if they don't have internet, that football field parking lot will be almost completely covered, and people can come and if they got their Chromebook, come in, they can turn in their assignments and go home. You know, they wouldn't have to use internet from home. Same thing for Blaine, same thing for Fallsburg. And we've ordered one other one. I think we're going to put Louisa East. We just don't feel like Louisa West has the capacity for that as the parking. But everyone could go to different schools to turn in their assignments. So we're trying to do things to help people out. With that being said, flexibility has been the biggest discussion today, and I feel that in talking with our principals, it will happen.
But whenever you talk about hotspots, that means the kids have to get to that particular
Yes, sir.
hotspot.
Mm-hmm.
And where, like Keith said, both he and his wife work.
Yes.
I'm sure that there's a lot of other parents in Orange County that do the same thing.
Sure.
They got to get that kid then into a particular area where he can have access.
Right, and again, that's due to the flexibility. You know, of course, Mr. Preston's going to have internet at home, and so he wouldn't have to come to the hotspot. But if a parent doesn't have internet, they can come in at 10, 9, 10, whenever the assignment's due. Or even if that's not possible, that's when communication with the parent and the teacher has to happen. You know, in all those surveys that we ask for working phone numbers. We ask for working email addresses. So if you look at the all NLC learning contracts, we ask specifically what is an access point that we can get to you quickly. So if your child's not turning in an assignment, we can call and ask you why. You know, that one-on-one is going to be very crucial to how we handle students moving forward, especially through September 28th and beyond. But I agree, both of you are absolutely correct.
Well, I think there's going to be other problems that we see as we go through this whole scenario.
Absolutely.
We're just talking about a couple of them right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be others that pop up that we don't anticipate.
But the only thing that can fix that is communication.
I'm sorry?
The only thing that can fix that is communication, and that's up to us, and it's also up to our parents. Because we can't, you're absolutely correct, we cannot anticipate every problem's going to happen.
Right.
So we have to have communication. If there's an issue that, you know, and I won't mention any names, I do know a couple families that they don't have a vehicle. And I mean, they're just as good as I am. They're no less people. They're just as good as I am. But it's going to be very difficult for them to come to a hotspot.
Right.
So we need to talk to those people and say, what can we do to help you? And I'm happy to say the principal's already brought that group to my attention and said, look, what are we going to do to help these people out? And we're going to work it out so we can. So that type of communication is very, very important. But it doesn't matter whatever the problem. The only way we're going to get a solution is that communication. Now, I'm not talking about just broadcasting something to everybody. It's that phone call to that specific parent or that specific child that we're not getting their assignments in or they're struggling. So absolutely, but the only way it'll be fixed is communication.
If they don't let you bring the kindergartners in the building, how are we going to, I mean, those children have no clue what school is even about. I mean, I don't see, some parents are not going to work with them at home.
Right.
You know that, I know that.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes, but,
Well, you know, let me go a step, if you don't mind, Ms. Roberts. I don't know how to teach a child how to read. I've got a doctorate in education. Now, I've got a math background, but all my work is dealing with high school. It's dealing with mathematics. So if I had a kindergartner right now trying to teach them how to read, I couldn't help them. You know, so what I would have to really rely on is that communication with my teacher to say, okay, what can I do? How can I help? What programs do I need to be on? But you're absolutely right. I mean, it doesn't have to be people that don't want to help. There'll be some very well-intended people, just like you're pointing out, that would want to help and just can't. And we got to find that, again, going back, communication is key. And you're absolutely right. Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
most of these children can do more on a computer than we can. So at kindergarten age, so.
That's true too.
What do these small groups going to look like?
I don't know. That's I got to wait for guidance. Now, what I'm telling you about is, again, just talking with some other superintendents and some conversations of possibly it'd be like special education students and small groups, possibly. Again, that's all speculation. I won't know until the guidance is released. Could it be for remediation? I'll give you a good example. At the high school, one of our math teachers said, I have a group of students that's going to take dual credit in college algebra. I would at least like to have them in the building in small groups to get them started to make sure they know how to use the system. The Hawk system is what's used at Morehead State for their college algebra. So she's asking for small groups. Here's another one, career and technical. You know, if we have small groups in carpentry class, they can come in. Again, it's going to depend on what that guidance looks like. Personally, it makes perfect sense that if we could bring in some kindergartners, but we're hoping that we could do in person on September 28th, and then possibly before then bring in some small groups.
And what if we don't?
Then we're going to have some serious conversations with Liberty Mutual.
It seems like every time we get close to the deadline, we start backing up again.
For full transparency, the school systems, the very few school systems that I know that are starting, we'll be watching them and asking what's going on with them. Like Greene County, you know, we'll be talking to Greene County to see what's going on and how successful are they. You know, we've all seen those pictures of the Georgia high school that had 4 students with a mask on, and everybody else without it. And you know, we're getting reports of thousands of students. You know, I think one high school, they said almost 1,000 students were quarantined. Again, reading articles, that's just what I'm reading online and trying to gather. But some of the schools that started back and didn't enforce the mask rule, the quarantine rules right there will, within 2 days, shut down that high school. So you're right, could it be kicked down farther? But whenever we're allowed to, we need to make sure that we have those safety guidelines in place, and our principals are working very diligently on that. As a matter of fact, I think Mr. Maynard could attest to it. I shared a 26-page document with them on just guidelines for starting school in person. 26-page checklists. So there's a lot of things that some of it's recommended by the state, some of the things are just local to Lawrence County, but when our students come back, we want to make sure we do the absolute best. That's why it makes sense to me to start off with some small groups, to see what we can do well, and then, then take a couple days to evaluate what we've done, and then move forward. But again, that's all going to be dependent upon what's our local data. Right now, I think we have 2 active cases, unless that's changed today. I think right now, the last thing I saw, we have 2 active cases. We're the poster child for being able to go have some small groups early. Right now.
One last thing, and I just want you to make it clear, I guess, like a scenario of an elementary school child, and my situation, like I said, my wife getting home at 6:30 on certain nights. Child has 4 20-minute videos that she's got to watch, and then 15, 20-minute assignments after that. And by the time my wife gets home at 6:30, it gets everybody settled in to sit down and do it at 7 o'clock. And then she's got, 4 videos, which are combined to over an hour, hour and a half. So now you're looking at 8:30. And then the assignments take 15, 20 minutes each or something like that. Mm-hmm. So now you're looking at 9. By that time, she's ready to go to bed.
Sure.
So, and she hasn't finished everything. Mm-hmm. So I want to make sure that we figure out that's going to be the biggest issue. That's the biggest issue that we hear, and I'm hearing all the time, is how do we handle this, and how much time are we going to have? Because then the next day comes, and the same thing, we're behind again, and we're behind again.
Here's something to think about. If we were really making this like school, every student should expect to do work, not necessarily be online, 6.5 hours.
I know.
6 hours. I mean, that's what people should expect, is to be working 6 hours a day. So, with those students like they're in kindergarten, of course, we're going to have to really streamline what we do. As they get older, our high school students, they should expect to be doing work at least 6 hours a day, because if you look at it, here's a great example. My daughter graduated a couple of years ago. She would go to school all day, and then sometimes be up until 1 o'clock at night trying to get other assignments, because we have some rigorous classes here at the high school, and I'm glad we do. She's doing very well in college right now because of it. But still yet, I think that a lot of our second graders, our third graders are going to be able to get on and do some things on their own. But still, they're going to have mom and dad. The kindergarten and first grade is what Mrs. DeLong's been working with very diligently. Also Mr. Jennings and also Miss Bowen. So with that being said, there will be some flexibility, and they're going to really try to focus on the math and reading and more than anything else. And then if there's a situation where somebody's getting behind, call the teacher. And there has to be communication there. It's not an easy answer, but I think that, again, communication is key. But flexibility, yes, sir. I believe if you will have flexibility from our teachers, but there's also has to be times where there's lines, because I've also got we also know students that they'll put things off as far back as they can. We sent out 2 weeks of packets. And a lot of times we'd have students wait until the night before to get all 2 weeks of packets done. So we don't want them to fall behind, but also too, we have to have enough flexibility to make sure that it's doable.
Yeah.
Last year, whenever we did a lot of virtual learning, did we evaluate and put some sort of statistics together to see how that compared to in-class?
We don't have any data to go on to compare, as far as you don't have, we could look at just pass-fail rates, those type of things, but if you look at, we haven't been able to test these students in map data, things like that, to see just exactly how successful. Now, if you look at our pass rates, it was very successful. But then again, how is that good comparable thing with in-person? Now, that being said, we did have a lot of plus delta lot analysis that happened after school was over for teachers to say what went well, what didn't go well, what can we do better. So there was a lot of that anecdotal type of analysis.
Well, that's a whole different scenario. What went well, what didn't go well, how we gonna?
Sure.
How are we gonna do something better? But whenever you start gauging a learning curve,
Sure.
it's totally different.
I understand that, but we have no way of testing students right
We're
now.
gonna do that going forward.
Yes, we'll do map testing going forward, but now here's the other thing too is, a lot of times, it's going to depend on how much parents are going to oversee their students, because we're going to be able to do map testing at home. We didn't have that capability in the past, but we can do map testing at home for those kids who are at home. Now, we have our window open after we go back in person, but even then, only a little less than 60% of our kids are going to be in person. We can genuinely test them and know what the testing atmosphere is like, but at home, we're going to have to trust our parents to give that test properly. And then again, when those kids come back, we'll give the map test again, or STAR test, whichever grade level they're in, to be able to tell how much did you learn, how did you drop, did you slide, did you increase. So if we're looking at data, we just have to have the opportunity to test. And that won't happen until after September.
Well, we had 2 months at least of last year.
Our window doesn't open until September. So until October actually this year. So I can't gauge a test if I didn't give them, I didn't give them a test over the summer. That wasn't possible. But we will be giving map testing coming up moving forward. What I'm saying is there's no mechanism for testing right now that we can test students until we get back in school, and in October there will be.
That's my point. Are we going to develop something to make sure that we can gauge when
We're going to use map testing, yes sir. It's a national standardized test and STAR testing. If you have a suggestion for something else, absolutely we'll use it. But that's what our district has used now for over a decade.
The last testing we did was back in December, correct?
Yes sir.
So we have the testing.
We have the testing from December.
Yeah, but that's a combination.
Yeah. But we could use it as a scale.
Sure.
Because
Sure.
we have those individuals that tested back in December.
Right.
And then if you test them in October.
And if you'll notice, state testing was canceled.
Yeah.
State testing was canceled at the end of last year. And right now, we don't know if federal guidelines, it has to be federally approved. We don't know if they're going to cancel state testing again or not. We ended last year before last, with 2 5-star schools. I'm sorry, a 5-star and a 4-star school. And several that were 3, in a district that was 3. But right now, until we get started, I can't administer a map test right now. But when our window opens in October, we can.
Well, you got to have a starting point.
Right. We'll use the data from December as our starting point.
Okay. So now you're going to test when?
October.
October.
Yes, sir.
So we're going to start school in
August 26th.
I'm sorry.
August 26th.
August 26th. But you're going to maybe start virtual or in class
Yes, sir.
in September. So there again, you're going to have a little bit of combination, but not as much.
Right.
You're still going to have muddy water.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be muddy water no matter what. I mean, as far as a test, the map testing is going to be used, the STAR testing is going to be used, but we figure that it's best to get those students in. Now, if we don't, we can still test in October. Even if it's moved farther down, we can still test in October because that's when our window. But we're going to be relying on parents to administer that test for us. If it's virtual, if we're in virtual at that point.
Well, we could argue about this for a long time. We'll talk about it later.
Okay. Again, Mr. C, it's just the opportunity for testing. We didn't have the opportunity to test in the spring because at that point, MAP didn't allow us, to my knowledge, to test from home. So if we would allow people, there just wasn't anything where we could measure that success from home. Now,
but if this gets pushed back, and we're still virtual in October.
We can, now MAP test is allowed to test from home. But again, the validity of that's going to be questionable because we're going to be asking parents not that our parents, you know, how many times, as the validity is going to be questionable no matter what. But as far as when you give that test, we're going to be allowing it to be administered by parents completely, as opposed to having them in our classrooms. And we do plan on administering in October, but again, how do you do that virtually? We'd have to depend on parents to do that for us at home. We don't have to do it. We don't have to do tests at all. We just decided that it would be best that we have some type of measure, at least something to work with.
I think you need that.
I agree.
You need it.
But if we don't, no matter where we give it, it's going to muddy the water, in my opinion.
Okay. Any other comment? Moving on.
Yeah.
4B, public comment. Do we have any public comment? I got one real quick one. Last fiscal court meeting, on behalf of the board, I went to the fiscal court meeting and asked them to make August the 26th Hero Day for our cafeteria workers and our bus drivers and everyone that was involved, all the volunteers, everyone that was involved in the food service program we did over the summer. And they agreed. So we're going to have a Hero Day for them, done by the county, done by the fiscal court, for their unbelievable numbers that they did. And that's well deserved. So I just did that on behalf of the board, on behalf of everybody here, and I think it's well deserved. Just wanted to mention that. Any other public comment? 5, student learning and support services. 5A, approved minutes of the July 20th, 2020 regular meeting.
Make a motion.
Jim makes the motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Barb seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. 5B, approved claims and orders of the treasurer. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Dr. Fletcher?
No, I think it's all self-explanatory. There is one thing, I apologize. There is one thing that we had some bond payments that we paid in between board meetings, but that's our typical bond payment. That's why that's done out of timeline a little bit, because we didn't want any type of penalty.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I make a motion.
Madeline makes a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Jim seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. 5C, approve the monthly finance report. Ms. Van Hoos?
Beginning balance for July was $3,062,679. The total revenue for the month of $1,689,759. Expenditures for the month were $1,485,861. With a fund one cash balance of $2,852,209. We ended the month of July at $3,344,723.
Any questions or comments from Ms. Van Hoos? We seen decent money coming in from the taxes and everything. Are they coming in on time? And I know this is a hard time. Okay. So we haven't got anything from that, but the regular fees are coming in pretty decent.
Yeah, we'll probably